Good day, friends. I'd like to welcome each one of you to our devotional today. We have been looking yesterday and today at how to develop spiritual maturity, and this is of utmost importance. We know that it is the desire of God that each and every one of us be conformed to the image of the Lord Jesus Christ. And in order to do that, we must develop spiritually and develop spiritual maturity. And yesterday we saw the importance of learning submission to those people who are older than us, and also to those who are in authority over us. We saw this whole idea of the importance of getting rid of our self-will and what it is that we want to do and what our agendas are, and that we surrender to the Lord Jesus Christ, and that we develop humility, and that we deal with this issue of pride that is at the root of so many different sins. And by way of application, let me say this: whenever there's contention, whenever there's fighting, whenever there's quarreling within a church, we can be sure that pride is at the root of it. In Proverbs 13:10, it says, "Only by pride cometh contention." And pride is something that rears its ugly head so often, and we must be quick to deal with it as a people of God. I want to read 1 Peter 5, verses 7, 8, and 9 today, and look a little further at how we develop maturity spiritually. It says there, "Casting all your care upon him, for he careth for you. Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour. Whom resist steadfast in the faith, knowing that the same afflictions are accomplished in your brethren that are in the world." So we see that another thing, according to these verses, that we do in order to develop maturity in our lives as believers is that we need to learn the importance, very simply, as the hymn writer would put it, of taking our burden to the Lord and leaving it there. So often we may take our burden to the Lord. Sadly, many times we carry our own burdens rather than taking them to the Lord. And sometimes we're in the habit of taking those burdens to the Lord but not leaving them there. And we see in 1 Peter 5 and verse 7 that it says, "Casting all your care upon him, for he careth for you." Let me remind you, in Matthew 11:28, Jesus said, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." So there we have that invitation from Jesus to come to him. Each and every one who is laboring is heavy laden, and he will give us rest. In Philippians chapter 4 and verse 6, it says, "Be careful for nothing, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto God." So there we see in all of these verses that it talks about the importance of taking our burden to the Lord and leaving those burdens with him. Now, in order to claim this promise that to cast our burdens upon the Lord, let me remind you that once again we must obey verses 5 and 6. Until we humble ourselves and empty ourselves of pride, that will hinder us from bringing our burdens and cares to the Lord. Because you see, for me to come to the Lord and acknowledge that I need him, that I need his help, and that I need his enabling, is a big strike on our ego. So pride is something that must be set aside for me to come to the place that I will acknowledge, "Lord, I need you," and that I will come humbly before him asking for his help. Why should I come before him? Let me just give you 4 reasons very quickly, beyond the fact, he's told us to, and that ought to be enough for us. But one of the reasons why we need to come to him beyond that is because he gives us the courage to face our cares honestly. When we come to the place that we bring our cares and our concerns before him, he will bring us to the place and he will give us the courage to face our cares honestly. We won't have to mask our cares or belittle them or pretend they're really not that important, but he will allow us to face them honestly. In Isaiah 41 and verse 10, it says, fear thou not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee, yea, I will help thee. Yea, I will uphold thee with the right hand of my righteousness. So one of the reasons why we ought to bring our cares and cast them upon him is because when we do that, he gives us the courage to face them honestly. Secondly, he will give us the wisdom to understand the situation. And there's no wisdom on earth like God's wisdom, and how important it is that we have God's wisdom in the situations of life that we face. And it says in James 1:5, if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, that giveth to all men liberally, and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him. So he will give us wisdom to understand the situation. Thirdly, when we cast our cares upon him, he will give us the strength to do what it is that we must do. Let me remind you of Philippians chapter 4, verse 13, where it says, I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me. And also, I need to cast my cares upon him, because when I do that, he gives me the faith to trust him to do the rest, to do what I cannot do, to leave it in his hands. Psalm 37:5 says, commit thy way unto the Lord, trust also in him, and he shall bring it to pass. Friends, we are wise to cast our burdens upon the Lord, because it gives us all of these things. We are instructed to cast our burden upon the Lord, and it's a smart thing to do, because we know and we ought to be assured that he cares for us. Casting all your care upon him, for he careth for us. In Isaiah 55:22, it says, cast your burden upon the Lord, and he shall sustain thee. He will never suffer the righteous to be moved. So we see here, as we come to 1 Peter 5, as we learn about developing maturity, that we need to come to the place where that we have a simple faith in a great God, and that faith enables us to cast all of our care upon him, knowing that he cares for us. But also, if I'm going to develop spiritually, if I'm going to develop maturity, I need to be alert to Satan and his desires. It says in verse 8 of 1 Peter 5, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour. Friends, we need to be alert. We need to be aware of the enemy. We need to be aware of his desires. And know, as it says in this verse, that as a Christian, he wants to devour you, he wants to destroy you, he wants to destroy your testimony, and we must be aware of Satan, we must be aware of his tactics, and we must be aware of his desires for our lives. Remember what Jesus said in Luke 22, verse 31? He said, Satan hath desired to have thee, that he may sift thee as wheat, but I have prayed for thee, that thy faith fail not. You see, the only way that you and I can resist Satan successfully is we must be steadfast in the faith. It says in verse 9 of 1 Peter 5, whom resist steadfast, notice this, in the faith, knowing that the same afflictions are accomplished in your brethren that are in the world. As we think about this idea of resisting him steadfastly in the faith, let me remind you what it says in James 4, verses 7 through 10. Submit yourselves therefore to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw nigh to God, and he will draw nigh to you. Cleanse your hands, ye sinners, and purify your hearts, ye double-minded. Be afflicted, and mourn, and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning, and your joy to heaviness. Humble yourselves in the sight of God, and he will lift you up. Friends, in order to resist Satan successfully, we must be steadfast in the faith. Let me remind you of three things about Satan today as we close. First of all, he is dangerous, and we need to respect his power. You and I, in and of ourselves, are no match for the enemy of our souls. But I'm thankful today that Revelation 12 and verse 11 says that they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. Yes, he is dangerous. Yes, I need to respect his power. But Christian 1 John 4:4 says, greater is he that's in me than he that is in the world. Not only is he dangerous, and I need to respect his power, but secondly, he is a deceiver, and I need to recognize him for who he is, that he is indeed a deceiver. Listen to what it says. Jesus said this about Satan in John chapter 8, and in verse 44. It says there, John 8:44, ye are of your father the devil, and the lusts of your father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a deceiver, or he is a liar rather, and the father of it. With that verse in mind, let me read for you 2 Corinthians chapter 11, that reminds us of us needing to be aware of him, and that he is a deceiver. 2 Corinthians 11 verse 13 says, for such are false apostles, deceitful workers, transforming themselves into the apostles of Christ. And then verse 14, and no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. Therefore it is no great thing if his ministers also be transformed as ministers of righteousness, whose end shall be according to the works. He reminds us there that Satan seeks to deceive us, and that he also has false apostles, false preachers, who preach deception. Oh, there may be truth there, but it is mixed with a lie. And then last of all, let me say this: he has drive, and we must resist him. Ephesians 6 verses 10 through 13 talk about the armor of God and how we can stand against the wiles of the devil. It does not tell us to flee from the devil, because he'll always outrun you, he'll always get you in the back, but stand and resist him. And we can stand through the power of God, through the enabling of the armor of God upon our lives. It enables us to stand against the fiery darts of the wicked one. 1 Corinthians 10:13 says, there is no temptation taking you, but such as is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not suffer you to be tempted above that you're able, but will also with the temptation also make a way to escape, that you may be able to bear it. I trust as we've looked the last couple of days at how we can develop maturity in our lives as believers, that you'll be able to take some of these areas that the Bible talks about working on, and it will help you develop spiritual maturity in your life as you live for God in 2019. Have a great day.